Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a quick second to apologize for how long it took me to get this one out. I know I'm a bit late to the party. I'm not doing my usual outro, so if I did a good job, if you'll, hit the buttons, help out the review, and that way you don't miss more content. And if you don't have a comment to leave on Clair Obscure Expedition 33, I'd love to get some feedback on this review. But most importantly, have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for your time.
Expeditioners, the Sword of Lumias. We honor your dedication. We do not take for granted that you dedicate your final year of life to keeping hope alive for all of Lumias. Some of you are leaving to change the world, others to discover the secrets of our universe. Some to protect loved ones, others to find meaning in our all-too-short lives. As you sail into the unknown, know that Lumias stands with you. When you battle the Paintress, know that Lumias fights with you. Let the stones of her monolith crumble. Let her body lie at the end of the world. Unable to paint another death, let the stars no longer be hidden by her oppressive silhouette. Let the world once again watch the sun rise without the shadow of her cursed figure. May the wind of renewal take you to the ends of the earth. Tomorrow comes. Thanks to you. Expedition 33.
Good morning, good afternoon, and or evening, and welcome back to the Den, and to the A Day in the Life review of Clair Obscure Expedition 33. Now for these kinds of reviews, I play a game for 24 hours and either give my initial impressions or a complete review depending on the game. And for Sandfall Interactive's and S.A.S.'s work of art published by Kepler Interactive Clair Obscure Expedition 33, it is an initial impressions. You could also say it's like kind of a review of Act 1 because I barely broke into Act 2 in the 24 hours, but I digress. Expedition 33 is playable on PlayStation, or PS5, PC, Xbox Series consoles, GeForce Now, Xbox Cloud Gaming, and Game Pass, which is how I played, and is also playable through Boostroid. Now, Expedition 33 is not yet available DRM-free on GOG, but a cat can dream, and this cat is gonna dream. Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is a masterpiece of high fantasy harking back to the greats of age-old RPGs while bringing some new elements and fresh takes on the turn-based combat. From the characters, to the world, to the music, to the art style, to the combat, and to the plot and its twists, Sandfall delivers a striking and gripping tale of thrilling highs and soul-crushing lows right from the start. Throughout my time thus far, I found myself hanging on every scene, craving to see what was coming around the next bend, or what new challenges awaited our stalwart heroes, or I found myself nostalgia tripping while I ran back to the nearest expedition flag so I could respawn the random mobs to grind another level, or another Picto, or I was buried in my character menus trying to spec out each character as perfectly as I possibly could for how I wanted to play them. Expedition 33 masterfully combines these old elements with new spins and a brand new story that has ace after ace in its voice cast to deliver one of the most original and unique games that I have played in a very long time. I see elements from Final Fantasy VII, the original, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy Tactics, Suikoden, Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger, Xenogears, Legend of Dragoon, Lunar and Lunar 2, the Arc the Lad trilogy, Star Ocean the Second Story, Dot Hack, and the Dark Cloud games. A little bit of each of the classics, well, my classics at least, peeking out at me while I traversed the world, combated the various enemies, and made some interesting new friends along the way. This is something that struck me immediately, besides how damn beautiful the game is this twisting, contorting, blending together of what has come before and what comes after. The setting of Lumiere illustrates this perfectly, as it too is a blending of the old world that came before some cataclysmic event that sundered the world, leaving the seemingly last bastion of humanity in the dark and at the mercy of this new world that the paintress seems to have shaped. The old French architecture with this blue glass-like stone material wrapping around and through structures, or completely filling streets and alleys between buildings or jutting into the sky. A bent and somewhat mangled Eiffel Tower with this stuff covering part of it, and what I can only guess to be a lookout tower sitting atop it, towering over the city, set against a sky pierced and fractured itself by these gargantuan shards of earth floating above, each possibly an entire land of their own. A mixture of this is thrown at you visually as you move across the rooftops of Lumiere and get your basic movement, traversal, and combat tutorials. On a 3070 Ti paired with an i9 9900K and 64GB of RAM, things ran smoothly and looked gorgeous. I made the mistake at first of setting shadows and some illumination settings to medium, and this created some noticeable effects, especially in cutscenes and close-up dialogue scenes, and were later changed to high for much improvement with no noticeable effect on performance. I did have fluctuations in frame rate throughout Act 1. This seemed to be related to how much was going on in each area versus the world map or camp versus cutscenes. Each would remain stable in their own range, with cutscenes running at the same FPS always, but each had their own range fluctuations. Consistently, I would experience stuttering upon initial loads into the game and into individual zones, but this was a mere second or two and nothing that affected immersion or cutscenes. The only issue I experienced in Act 1 that I do not relate to my hardware or settings is in the very final cutscene sequence. The big one. You'll know it when you get to it. There was a few seconds where Renoir and Verso were talking and the audio desynced from the cutscene. Again, this was just a few seconds, maybe 5 words from each character, and it was back to the most immaculate matching of facial animations to voice that I have personally seen. The only reason I even noticed is because of how well done the facial animations are matched to the voices. Again, none of these issues affected gameplay or the immersion of the experience, and speaking of the gameplay, which I will get to more of later, it is well tutorialized, but you have to read and remember. Not much hand-holding as you play through. Tutorials are delivered in side-screen splash pages that break down what is being explained and does thoroughly explain things, but you have to read and look on the screen to see what is being explained, or you can be left with a half understanding or just plain confusion later. This is something that may be a turn-off from some older style RPGs, but Sandfall compensates by having a tab in the menus for each tutorial that the player has received, and more to help with recall or figuring things out later on or again. Just have to read, which may not be the most popular thing, but nothing that was a turnoff for me. I guess Sandfall included the old game manual inside the game because, well, a lot of the stuff you find in the tutorials is the kind of stuff you'd find in the manuals. The UI for combat is explained well in the tutorial fight with Mael, and is laid out well visually for easy navigation and use of items, skills, basic attacks, dodging, and parrying. Later on, the menus, character menus, Pictos, Luminas, weapons, shops, and world map/camp are tutorialized in the same way, very well, but you have to read and pay attention to what the tutorial is pointing out on the screen. I can't stress that enough, or for the tutorials in the menus. Something of special note, at least to me, is how players are rewarded with a bonus for beating Mael in the tutorial fight. There is no punishment for not beating her, and the reward isn't huge, but it's still something nice to see. One of those old elements I mentioned earlier. Something else that I think is special about this tutorial is that while it does acquaint you with the basics of combat, it doesn't give you the full experience of combat, which leaves something to add on later as expedition members meet back up with each other. And Sandfall does add on to combat later on, with more combat mechanics becoming available in the form of a jump and counter to add some variety to the dodging and parrying, and digging down into each expedition member, who is a whole gameplay loop in and of themselves. But more on that later. As I said, the various aspects of my technical experience with Expedition 33 also did not affect the immersion of the story and experience, which brings us to Sophie.
The last few days meant everything.
Can we talk?
Gustav. I love you all.
That's for your, if there's room.
There's always room.
You know, I'm sorry that... I miss
you don't need to... Okay.
You go.
No, you.
You know how I feel? I wish things had been... You know, I often think... Another path, you know, another future.
Still can't finish your sentences, can you?
Yep, that hasn't changed.
I missed that. I never faulted you for wanting to believe. You're fighting. To change things. I understand, just... in a different world, right?
We'll break the cycle, so she can't steal anyone else's future.
Stubborn people change the world. And you are the most stubborn person I know. Thank you. Walk me to the harbor?
Yes.
Sophie further illustrates the ever-present theme of beauty and hope set against the bizarre and sorrowful world that Lumiere is a part of. She, like the many that adorn her neck when we first see her, is a beautiful flower blossoming and bringing joyous life to a dying world, much like the rest of Lumiere. Gustav thinks so too from his bashful greeting. This scene, like the story of Clair Obscure Expedition 33, plays like interactive theater with how Sandfall presents it and has the player interact with it. Here, players are swapped to controlling Sophie instead of Gustav. Players can swap back to Gustav, but in running around as Sophie, many of the upcoming dialogue scenes make more sense aesthetically. This is another example of a new spin on traditional presentation in RPGs. Traditionally, players would run around towns and/or the maps represented as the quote-unquote main character for the story or party only, or with the other party members trailing in tow. Being able to swap between each available party member as you run around is an enjoyable new spin, and for my time in Act 1, I would commonly run around as whoever I was auto-swapped to, or as the character not currently in my battle party. Personally, I love this because I can, give equal love to the whole party, run around as my favorite, or just go with the flow of whoever the game swaps me to. Just kind of a nice personal preference thing that I think adds something without taking anything away. Now here we get to my first two gripes. The first is with the subtitles. They have this blurred out background that mostly went unnoticed for me at first, but as time went on, it began to stand out more and more. The font and style of the subtitles is grade A, especially because you can optionally have the name and color coding added for who is talking, but the blurring out of the background got to me, especially when you got to the Gamage scene. Now, I foolishly deleted the footage that I had because I restarted the whole game and without subtitles enabled, so I can't show you what I mean, but I've also heard from several others that this was not an issue for them, so ultimately it may just be a me thing. My second gripe is with something that is also tied to something that harkens back to RPGs of old. You can search the trash cans! When I walked up to a trash can shortly after getting control of Sophie, I smiled from ear to ear and audibly gasped so loudly that Miss Macabre, who was sitting next to me with her headset on, heard me and asked what happened. So, imagine my utter dismay and heartbreak to find that there was nothing in any of them. The audacity, the gall, the gumption, the testicular fortitude Sandfall has to give me searchable trash cans, but then not give me any kind of reward for my due diligence of searching them all and exploring to find them all. How dare they? It's a sin. And speaking of exploring, this is where Lumias introduces that, and it incorporates an aspect to exploration that I think has been sorely missing from games for a while. Exploration is simple in concept, but still has depth. Each area is a set of paths that dead end, circle back on each other, or loop back around to other parts of the area or map. Conversely, the world map is much more open. Exploring down each nook and cranny is where a ton of free Lumina points, upgrade materials, and Pictos as well as extra chroma come from. Similarly, in town areas, it is greatly beneficial to roam around and talk to everyone that you can, because you never know when you will come across a hidden fight or a hidden shop or Pictos or whatever just waiting behind them. And Esquie?
No Esquie.
Bonjour, mes amis.
Hey, bonjour mon ami. CL? Odd. I don't know. He seems nice.
Well, he's an immediately lovable character that you meet towards the end of Act 1, and he helps out with this on the world map, acting as your mount for smashing through these unbreakable blue rocks, or as a water mount for traversing across the waves. At least that I've discovered so far. We do see Esquie flying and flittering through the air too, so I imagine I will unlock that ability for him at some point coming up. And Esquie's abilities help you to get to certain areas of the map that you couldn't otherwise, and this allows you to, among other things, find some of the hidden Nevrons around, which is where this missing element from exploration comes in. These Nevrons, which are creations of the Paintress like all Nevrons, are in distress in some way or another and they need your help. Helping them usually means finding something hidden within the area, or that a certain hidden mini-boss fight will reward, and that once returned to the Nevron will, heal or fix them. And then you have the opportunity to learn another perspective about what has been going on that our expeditioners may not immediately be aware of. The same can be said about the faceless boy you will find around from time to time, and I definitely suggest you talk to him every time. And this is something that has been missing from games for a while. Storytelling as a reward for exploration. This is not some collectible, readable thingy in some pop-up menu, nor is this some side quest box to check off on some list, nor is this something that you'd necessarily find in an achievement list or even factored into a how long to beat time. This is storytelling that you find presented to you in the game and that you wouldn't have found otherwise without looking under every rock. Sometimes literally. This presentation of the overall story was something more surface level for those that don't fully explore, and then something deeper with more subtext and context for those that dig in is another thing that harkens back to older games. I mean, this is how some RPGs built up their cult classic type followings back in the day. From peaceful forests to balmy beaches to a mysterious mansion to an undersea fantasy land or to a village of an extremely lovable race of living mannequins, you can find them almost anywhere. So be on the lookout. And Lumiere remains true to form in condensing most of this down to its more contained area and artistic but concise presentation. There is a hidden cosmetic tutorial buried behind challenges that you have to wander around and talk to other people to find. A tougher rematch with Mael and a quiz all provide character and world building. As Sophie, when you are running around and exploring, you can find these different scenes that show off how others are facing the upcoming Gamage and the next expedition setting off. Some are going about their everyday lives, some are setting up or tearing down from the festival, some are still celebrating, some are thinking of things that they might be able to create in memory of the expedition, and some are imagining what lies out there beyond Lumiere, and some are really celebrating, if you know what I mean. The dialogue scenes that have to be progressed by the player also contribute to the storytelling, framing each bit of dialogue as if it was its own scene in a TV show or movie, positioning the camera at different angles to light or shade the speaker like theater for a visual emphasis on what is being said. Characters are introduced and relationships established very well with enough dialogue and context to create a familiarity in history without extensive exposition. The amount of history established between Gustav and Sophie, or Gustav and Mael, through the three of them is enough to demonstrate their long history without having to unnecessarily bloat the prologue or dialogue to do so. Exceptional, in my opinion. Story-wise, Gustav is the reluctant leader-elect after the landing and is seemingly teetering on the brink between hopeful conviction and debilitating despair. He cares for Mael and is protective of her, maybe a little romance thing going with CL, at least she keeps seemingly to flirt with him. As events have unfolded, he has become more brave and outgoing with his team, increasing his disposition, and even becoming a bit hopeful, and maybe even just a little relaxed. Mael is the heart of the team and its fiery courage as well, matching her hair. She is strong and kind yet reserved. She has a wonderful spirit and sense of humor, which she expressed most often by teasingly chiding Gustav for various little things here and there, and she helps Gustav to come out of his crevice of despair. But behind all of this, Mael is haunted by these nightmares, and I haven't figured out why she's the only one having them, but through the dread and fear the nightmares inspire in her, you get to see her vulnerable side as well, expressing itself as though she could be a harbinger of the expedition's doom. CL is the lioness on the outside, but kind of a scaredy cat on the inside, at least with water. Even in Lumiere, she seemed to be troubled before ever leaving on the expedition. She disappeared in the chaos of the landing, then when the team comes across her later, she is reveling in the cheers of the locals as their unbeaten champion of the arena. But shortly after finding her expedition mates, she quickly goes back to being seemingly haunted by something. She is either teasing or flirting with old Gustav, but I can't tell if this is to hide what is haunting her from him, or if it is genuine. Lune's character is the very kind and supportive yet stern older sister. Sometimes. Other times, she is this ever-inquisitive and curious, hopeful thinker, finding the silver linings in everything, or almost everything. And sometimes she is wildly distracted by her curiosity. She does have her down moments, but hasn't really had any moments of really exposed vulnerability like Mael. Seeing her curiosity written all over her face with that half-smile gape expression is a treat every time. And the music! Oh, the music! Lorien Testard is and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, is a musical genius and has truly composed something special with this original soundtrack. The music is ever-present but not overpowering, like opera or theater, dancing in and around each scene, teasing you and setting the mood, while letting voice actors take main stage. The variety of themes matching each setting and flowing from one to the next as you move from area to area is magical and has been very complimentary to the story and the characters in keeping me enthralled in the narrative. All of this, just beyond the surface level, each providing a breath of life through subtext and exploration, each bringing the city and people of Lumiere into a vibrant, defiant, and yet hopeful life in the shadow of the Paintress's tower. Actually, this is the first thing that caught my attention, and it has hung ever present in the back of my mind, much like the denizens of Lumiere. A nagging despair and hopelessness peeking over every hill, from behind every stand of trees, on the horizon every time you make camp, watching you with those numbered eyes, through every window and down every alley of Lumiere, like a doomsday clock counting down. At times, this fuels my drive to reach the Paintress and to be the expedition that ends this torment on Lumiere, and at other times, its eerie vision casts doubt and dread on every thought. Lumiere as an intertwining tutorial area and prologue are an absolute masterpiece and masterclass of introducing players to gameplay mechanics, exploration, and the characters. Innovating and providing new spins and bringing forward an old genre, yet harkening back to all of the elements and style that established that genre as a great, and entrapping players into the must-experience high fantasy and emotional epic that is Clair Obscure Expedition 33.
I see you're apprentices.
Oh.
Gustav!
What?
Here, Sophie asked us to bring you your coat. We sewed up the sleeves so you don't have to keep rolling it up.
You guys know how to sew?
Sophie helped us. Turns out it's not that hard. You really should have done this ages ago.
You did this?
Gentlemen, that was supposed to be between us, yeah? I wanted to do something for you.
Soph. Thanks, guys. This is great. Thank you.
See you at the festival? Don't leave without saying goodbye.
Yeah, of course not. What? I know that face.
You mean a lot to them. I can tell.
Yeah, they mean a lot to me too. Legacy can take many forms, right?
Yeah,
You told me that.
right.
Why?
I wanted to see you wearing it.
Oh, you like uniforms now?
This too is your legacy.
In a way. It's yours too.
Esti tonnere marina, esti linaki soledad, tona lora tovla, alina. Esta surano taki, les renoirs, tonare fuego verso, alina, ai.
I'm here.
And now to combat. The menu is well laid out. You have items, skills, base attack, free aim, and the ability to skip that character's turn that round. Your items can heal health, it's a potion, give 3 AP to one character, or revive one character, a Phoenix down. These can be upgraded with materials found exploring around to increase the number and effectiveness. Each character has the ability to free aim, which allows you to manually aim and fire a ranged attack for 1 AP per shot. Combat is turn-based, and the turn order is shown on the left side of the screen and is determined by the agility or speed of the character at a base level, which can be augmented by equipped Pictos and weapons. You can also get speed or agility buffed up to the point where a character can go multiple times in a row or in short succession. There are Pictos or Luminas that can be equipped to increase the speed of the character. As an example, the First Strike Picto or Lumina, which makes the character go first. Oftentimes in boss or mini-boss battles or fights that are meant to be a tier above where you're at or are meant to be, something that you come back to later, one or more enemies will get to go multiple times before your party. This is more artificial difficulty that exists to give stakes to the fight or for plot reasons, or is meant to provide a greater challenge through making the fight more of a marathon instead of a sprint, where you have to engage with the mechanics and master them to be able to win. Staying true to inspiration and tradition, this artificial level of difficulty, outside of the plot-related stuffs, can be overcome with some grinding. I nostalgia tripped so hard running around zones, resting at an expedition flag, and finding all the small mobs to grind out some early levels or to complete a batch of new Pictos quickly so I could run around with the ones I wanted equipped. This is something I used to do so much in older RPGs. I could so that way I could either be at the level of the enemies if they were, tuned to be a little harder than me, or so that way I could have an advantage over them, or because, of some character/move related mechanic, kind of looking at Star Ocean, the second story there. The Pictos and Luminas had me doing the same thing in Expedition 33, but there was something that had me doing this even more: learning each character's loop. Each character is unique not only for their role in the story, but also for how they operate in combat. Each character has, their own thing that plays into others' movesets or plays into their own. In combat, Overcharge is Gustav's game, which is pretty simple and straightforward, but powerful. Dodging, parrying, attacks, and skills build up charges, and the Overcharge skill does drastically increase damage based off the number of charges, up to 10. I ran Gustav around firing a free aim shot or two, then using his base attack to get multiple buffs from Pictos and Luminas for the next turn, when I would use Lumiere Assault, which would usually put me up to 9 or 10 charges for Overcharge the next round. If I found myself lacking in the AP I needed, I would just throw in another base attack or another free aim base attack combo in the rotation. Gustav ended up being my almost one-size-fits-all solution because of Overcharge to many situations, even though I did not intend for that. Stances are Mael's thing, similar to Overcharge. Not complicated, but powerful. Mael will start on stanceless and then mainly cycle through 3 others, which are offensive, which deals 50% more damage, but you also take 50% more damage. Defensive, you take 50% less damage, but you also deal 50% less damage. And then Virtuous Stance, 200% damage increase with no penalties. For Mael, I get to Virtuous Stance as quickly as possible, and I focus on doing my best to keep her in Virtuous, and if I can't, I get her into defensive for that damage reduction. You mainly just don't want her going back into stanceless, so you don't have to spin up the whole cycle all over again. Also, one of Mael's skills swaps her into Virtuous if the target is burning, which is really common for my party. Late in Act 1, I did come across a weapon for Mael that starts her in Virtuous Stance, which is really sweet, and it's a lot easier to keep her there that way. Ciel is the darkness-dealing yin-yang mistress of death with her scythe weapon. She is special in that she kinda has 2 mechanics running simultaneously. The first is Foretell, and the second is her Sun Moon charges. They work in tandem with skills that give a Sun charge also applying Foretell, and skills that give a Moon charge consuming Foretell to apply an extra effect or a damage buff or some other kind of buff or debuff. Once Ciel has equal Sun and Moon charges, the next turn she will go into Eclipse, super mode basically, in which she applies double the usual amount of Foretell and does 50% more damage. Also, where she can only usually apply 10 Foretell to one enemy, in Eclipse she can apply 20 Foretell to one enemy. A weapon I came across for Ciel allows her to heal with each hit she applies or consumes Foretell, and with the move Bad Omens, which hits each enemy twice, she can shrug off some damage and come back really quickly if she's able to hang in a fight. I focus on getting Ciel into Eclipse as quickly as possible and use multiple skills that are able to apply Foretell to multiple enemies to give her multiple targets for unleashing her Scythe of Death. In combat, Lune is the elemental mistress that will burn you, freeze you, bury you in rocks, and call her wrath down via thunderbolts from the sky. Lune's moves generate stains. Well, a stain or stains, based on the kind of move used. Blue for ice moves, red for fire moves, green for earth moves, and yellow for electric moves. Also, Lune will sometimes be able to generate a light or colorless stain that can take the place of any color. These will feed into other moves to buff their damage, add an extra effect, or make the move consume no AP or go again immediately. Lune is my favorite character in combat because of all the different combos of skills she can get access to by the end of Act 1. I have 3 complete different skill sets for her based off of what element I want to favor. Lune can also act as the healer as well with her skills. She has one that can heal and apply regen, and she has the ability to revive. She is so versatile, so awesome. She is my favorite character in combat. I love the Picto Lumina system. Pictos are basically passive skills that also come with stat buffs, and Luminas are the same passive skills as Pictos, only without the stat buffs. Combining these in different ways to buff stats that play into increasing a weapon's damage or just to shore up a weakness in the stats with the Pictos while making a character more powerful and increasing their capabilities is awesome, and the system is well done in balancing more powerful effects with costing more Lumina points. This forces players to make some sacrifices while at the same time being able to build craft for that character on top of their weapon and skill choices. This is very synergistic and oh so wonderful to play around and experiment with, not even mentioning all the different and powerful builds you can make for each character. And this brings us to dodging and parrying, a new spin on turn-based combat because you now have something that you have to do during every enemy turn. This deepens the combat and ups the stakes for fights because parrying allows you to not only block all the damage, but also to deal damage to the enemy on their turn. Combined with Pictos and Luminas, perfect dodging can also get you AP back as well. I thought at first when parrying proved to be tough, and reading each enemy's attacks correctly to dodge and avoid damage proved somewhat tough too, that I could ignore this mechanic and overlevel or just run Lune with a bunch of healing and revive skills, and then I wouldn't have to worry with it. This seemed mostly true as I moved through the game, even after fighting my first mime in Lumiere. Then, while exploring the map before heading into the Gestural Village to advance the plot, I came across the hidden Gestural Arena and that freaking little kid. These fights were clearly demonstrated to be something that I was not ready for. Not only because the enemies were 1 or 2-shotting me, but because I was doing so little damage to them, even with my boy Gustav. I beat the first 2 with some difficulty and thought, okay, I can do this. And then I fought Dominique Giant Feet and Julian Tiny Head. For over 2 hours, these 2s thrashed me repeatedly, time and again, over and over. Then, as I was tired, getting to nod off around 1:30 a.m., unwilling to quit, I started to get it. I started dodging every attack from Dominique with me. Suddenly revitalized, I caught my second wind, and I knew I could do this. I knew I could beat him. Less than 10% health to go. 1 or 2 more turns max, and I won. Then, the soul-crushing mistake. I missed a dodge entirely, and it was over. I threw up my hands, and I gave up. I went to bed. Late night, the next day, I decided to try again. I figured, I'll give it a few tries. With the mindset that I'd probably do better, but still wouldn't beat those 2 fights. And if I couldn't, I would just move on with the story, come back to it later, right? But I did better than I thought. I was getting Dominique down to less than 25% health each time before I would inevitably screw up and get wiped. And then around 2 a.m., which I did not intend to be trying that long, I get him 1 shot. Dominique goes twice. And on his second turn, I screw up. Dead. At that point, something snapped in me. Something washed over me, an anger a defiance, a conviction. Suddenly, I didn't care that it was 2:30 a.m. I didn't care that I was a grown-ass man and that this was a goddamn video game, or that I had to be at work at a.m. They weren't gonna beat me. And I tried again and again. And then I started to tell myself, parry, you scaredy cat. Then I began to hit every dodge and every parry. I came back, nailing every one, being forged in fire, molded by my determination and failure, and I beat them. I stood up from my chair and roared with victory. I won. It was glorious. And then I heard very loud and obvious stomping of someone walking out of the room above me and into the other bedroom for the apartment above me, because you know they're laid out the same. Sorry again for shouting at 3 a.m. It was so refreshing to be slapped down and to have to learn the mechanic. Honestly, a weird thing to say, but true. In these games, as I said before, I like to grind and get a leg up on the enemies I will be fighting, and as a reviewer, this helps me to maintain a healthy pace through games. But that didn't happen here. And retrospectively, I'm better off for it. Not, the staying up till the 3 a.m., but, the whole getting the mechanic thing, Now, what I am not better off for is hearing that freaking kid, omble womba you, omble you, mocking me before and after every time I tried. I can still hear that little brat. The various skill combos, team comps, Pictos, Lumias, leveled up weapon abilities, combined with the dodge, parry, and jump keeps me coming back to the combat after every fight. The various skill combos, team comps, Pictos, Lumias, and leveled weapon abilities combined with the dodge, parry, and jump keeps me coming back to the combat after every fight. I spent the last couple of hours just to round things up to a day of playtime by running around the areas I'd already had been, going back just to fight the boss enemies I couldn't beat before, and I even found another couple of hidden ones with Esquie's help. These tougher fights, along with the hidden gestural arena, have been the most enjoyable fights so far. I wish I could go grind the bosses again, and maybe there's something later on in the game, but that is probably the most negative thing I can say about Expeditions 33's combat. I can't regrind the bosses. And for someone who is very familiar with traditional turn-based combat, the dodging and parrying take the mundaneness of turn-based combat and cranks it up to 11, making Clair Obscure Expedition 33's the most memorable in the genre that I have ever played. The classic mixed with high fantasy and a little bit of steampunk art style, the music, the characters, the voice acting, the combat, and the depth to Clair Obscure Expedition 33 have me chomping at the bit to play more. Seriously, it has been agonizing. Usually I'm thinking about the game and wanting to play more while I work on a review because, I want to finish the game, but there's been something different this time. Something more. A certain je ne sais quoi. I don't know. Expedition 33 appears to, on the front end, have great playtime value. Retailing for $50, I have already gotten between 24 and 25 hours of play out of Expedition 33, and if the other two acts have about the same playtime, then I will get roughly 72-ish hours out of the game. Keeping in mind my shtick about how you should never get less than 1 hour of play per dollar spent, this would get you almost 50% more playtime value out of Expedition 33 on just one playthrough. And with all of the secrets and the hidden things to find, as well as how differently you could run each character on a second or later playthrough, I dare say that Clair Obscure Expedition 33 has exceptional playtime value. I feel very confident in saying that. Maybe because I played through PC Game Pass, and by the time this review comes out, I'll have spent $24 on Game Pass specifically for Expedition 33. A hell of a value. And this is a game I will be picking up. Super long shot, hoping for a GOG release. because I would very much like to own Expedition 33. At least own it more than what I do through a Game Pass sub or any of the other options. After a day in the life, Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is a must-play. Wow. First time I'm saying that on the channel. Seriously, it is. I don't care if this ain't your kind of game, or if you hate story games, or if you only play first-person shooter extraction games because you're a real gamer. Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is a must-play. And if that changes, I'll be letting you know. But my initial impressions are a firm must-play. This is a must-experience narrative and a piece of artistic expression filled with passion and creativity. Sandfall have really laid it all on the line and put everything they had into Expedition 33. For those now, and for those who come after.